Now that I understand this right, I'm going to take it to the mic. So what I'm doing by recording these videos is something Cal Newport recommends, which is when you're developing a thesis, in the process of writing a paper, when you are refining your argument for its final presentation, what you want to do is verbally present it to friends and whoever several times so that you can explain the damn thing clearly and in an engaging way that people can actually follow. And my previous iteration was very, my written previous iterations were very academic and impenetrable, so I'm working on the popular version. And I'm using Minicam now, which gives me more options for how to do this better. I'll probably have to go to Camtasia eventually, but anyway. And I want to try to do as much storytelling as possible in this run. So, still Pot and Philosophy, still living up to its name, and yeah. So, I will start the conversation with my hypothetical high school materialist by asking, do you, good sir, good lady, believe in ghosts? And I expect the answer to be, of course, no. Ghosts are silly. They're for cartoons. They're for kids. They're not real. Or they're for hippies with crystal balls. Or easily frightened local yokels. Any 21st century man of science and reason knows that ghosts do not exist. Ghost hunters, Ghostbusters, that silly show where they wet themselves, scaring themselves in creepy places, is just a hoax and a fraud. The psychics are a joke, etc. And I will say to my precocious, if slightly obnoxious, high schooler, the obnoxiousness is coming from me, I'm sure. Right you are, sir. And in fact, you don't know how right you are. Let's get philosophical. Have you seen the movie? Well, let me tell you a story about Neo. One day, Neo woke up in a giant vat of pink goo and realized that he was a flabby, disgusting, pale, pasty wuss. But also that the whole world, everything, every experience that he'd ever lived up until that time had been a lie. How do you know, my friend, that this miasma of high school busy work is not simply the machines turning you into a battery bit by bit, beat by beat of your imprisoned heart? Well, of course you don't know. Maybe it's true, right? Not a useful thought in any practical sense, but sure, this is philosophy. It's not practical. So, okay. Well, Neo really had it kind of easy. What if he woke up as a fucking squid instead of just a wuss with extremely poor taste in body modification? Well, that would be awful. Being a squid would be a major life adjustment. I think Morpheus would have a much harder time getting and keeping recruits. Although I've never seen How the Other Side Lives, maybe being a squid is really cool. Detachable swimming penises? Is that a thing? Or is that just, Anyway, so, Okay. But what if Neo woke up and he was just like a squid brain thing, no body at all? Ugh. What if they just got rid of the excess and it's just a brain, man? Put me back to sleep, right? Well, what if Neo woke up and there was not even a brain? What if brains aren't a thing? Maybe we are sentient crystals being grown in the vast caverns of the evil empire of Zeldrek. Hey, let's get even more philosophical and pointless and impractical and say maybe there are no bodies at all, maybe there's no physical world at all. Maybe that's all a lie. Maybe we're really little angels growing in heaven. Maybe it's hell. Maybe we're being tortured in hell, actually. So, this has all been figured out before in the history of philosophy, of course, by a man named Rene, who probably got beaten up a lot for that, because it's kind of a girl's name, but he was French or something, I think, so par for the course. And his last name was Descartes. Most famously known for cogito ergo sum, but how did he arrive at I think therefore I am? Well, he started by doubting everything it was possible to doubt. The acid test. Like alien blood. You know, aliens versus predators. Those aliens. It burns through everything, the acid of doubt, leaving nothing remaining. Not even your face, literally. It burns off your face. How do you know faces are a real thing? You don't. So what are we left with after the alien blood of doubt has eaten away every single thing that might or could exist? Are we left with anything? Well, Descartes thought so. He thought we are left with quite a lot. He wound up proving the existence of God, and then I think he got around to the real world somehow or other. But anyway, he proved that lots of things exist, even after this acid bath. First of all, he proved that he existed, right? Because he said, well, I may be deceived about everything else, but at least I can be sure that I exist. Because if I did not exist, I would not be around to be deceived. Okay, good job, Descartes. You are in the top 20 golden oldies of philosophy for all time for that one. But guess what? Along comes a complete asshole named Immanuel Kant, who did nothing but eat and walk and read and write and meet with his friends all at defined punctual times during the day, all according to a set schedule. This German fucknick figured out that actually the acid bath is even worse. Trust the Germans to take a promising WMD and turn it into something truly horrifying. So, but trust the Americans to then turn it into something that dominates the world. We'll get to that. Anyway, I'm an American, but we'll go with Kant first. So, Kant is responsible for the Copernican revolution in philosophy. Now, Copernicus was a cranky guy who argued with the Pope and was rude enough to get himself shut up in his villa. But he supported the view that the universe does not revolve around the Earth, the stationary Earth, but rather the Earth orbits the Sun. We're all familiar with that. It's a great materialist coup over the insidious cancer of organized religion. But Kant had a sort of reverse Copernican revolution, because previously man thought that the philosophical universe revolved around God, if you go back far enough, or else at least matter, the earth, real stuff, right? But Kant proved that the universe actually revolves around the perceiver, the subject. So we are back to a geocentric, a man-centric view of all of reality, ultimate reality, philosophical truth. How did he do that? Well, he figured out that everything you perceive is filtered through the lens of the perceiver. Just as I am wearing these red glasses, and therefore I see everything in shades of red, so also man sees everything through certain predefined lenses. What lenses do you mean? Oh, little things like causality and space and time, words maybe. To some extent, they're inherent in the human architecture. Cognitive science and Kant and others have defined probably thousands of innate structures to the human mind that define or filter how we think. Before we've experienced or seen anything, we already have all these rules of architecture set up in place. But is any of this really true or real, or is it just an arbitrary feature of the subject? The world isn't actually red. I just see it that way because I'm wearing these glasses. So, now if we take our acid bath, we're losing things like reason and time and causation and space. And what's left, man? Not much. Nothing. Oh, so now we get postmodernism, right? And it doesn't happen immediately. The acid gradually eats through everything in philosophy, but we're ultimately left with, who knows, right? We don't know anything. So postmodernism doesn't believe in truth, right? Everything is relative. Everything is a power exchange. Truth is constructed. You may have heard that. Keyword constructed means that there's nothing at the bottom of it. It's all arbitrary. Everything is constructed. Okay. Well, if everything is constructed, then we have a relativist philosophy, and you can be a materialist or you can be a New Age hippie, and either way, I mean, who's to say who's right? You know? And that's kind of where we've ended up today. Because eventually philosophy does filter down to affect how the masses think. It doesn't happen immediately. It's a gradual process because almost no one reads philosophy. But the people who do read it are very smart. And very smart people tend to influence the culture disproportionately. So over time, eventually everyone starts to get, in line with the major concepts, the vibe from on high, right? So, but is the Kantian Copernican revolution really correct? Or can we find that's firm and solid and can't be destroyed by the alien acid blood of doubt? Even if we're wearing beer goggles and red glasses and every other kind of filter, is there anything we can still epistemologically know is true? Epistemology is the study of truth in the impractical philosophical sense. Well, we better start with reason, because if we don't have reason, then we don't have anything. Because anything that we try to say is true without reason can be both true and not true at the same time, right? Because no rational thought, no logical rules, right? So let's see if we can establish reason as beyond the touch of alien blood. Well, we want to go to the simplest chunk of reason available in order to, defend it, just to keep things as simple as possible, because it's already damn complicated enough. So, let's go to the fundamental law of reason, the law of identity, which states that A equals A. Imagine a little equation, algebraic symbol A, equal sign A, right? Okay. So, some of you may be thinking, like a man starts out as a child and then he becomes a teenager and then an adult, right? So it's still the same person but different things at different times. Think A can change into B, can change into C. Okay, but we're not thinking about that kind of stuff, right? All we're trying to do is test reason right now. And so if you wanted to, you could point out that a man becoming, a baby becoming a man is not a violation of A equals A, because it happens over time, right? It doesn't violate reason. So we could add the conditions A equals A at the same time, in the same relationship, or in the same way, not varying things external to the equation. Yeah, we're thinking in the philosophical style now, right? So that means you have to exercise tremendous focus and care with your definitions. Okay, so if you slip on your focus and your care with definitions, then everything falls apart. We are doing beyond neurosurgery here. Yeah. We're doing neurosurgery on the most fundamental questions in the cosmos from our perspective, right? So, assuming there is a cosmos, which we can't right now. So, A equals A is our fundamental unit of reason. Can we defend this, or do we have to toss out all of reason? Well, someone might say, maybe reason isn't true, or maybe rationality is arbitrary, and all of that boils down to maybe it's possible that somehow reason doesn't hold, or reason isn't true. And we can just boil that down as good philosophers into the fundamental statement, possibly, somehow, some way, somewhere, at some point, in some interpretation, A does not equal A, right? Because if A always equals A, then we can mathematically derive the rest of the laws, 1 plus 1 equals 2, substitution, etc. Everything can follow from that, right? All the structure of reason can follow from the law of identity. So, if we're going to say that maybe there's some kind of place where rationality doesn't hold, it means that that place, A does not equal A, right? At the same time, in the same relationship. Okay? So let's look at that statement, A does not equal A. Okay, if that statement is true, then it's also true that A equals A. You might say, well, those two statements are different. They do not equal each other. Yeah, but we just broke that law, so it doesn't matter, right? So the statement can be A equals A and A does not equal A, right? Anyway, I'm just demonstrating by expanding a little bit, by showing different implications of it, that the statement is unintelligible, right? A does not equal A at the same time and in the same respect. That statement computes to null, right? What does it mean? You can't figure anything out. There's no content there. It's just, it's the same content as if I go, right? There's just null. So, fine. The statement, maybe reason doesn't hold or is arbitrary, whatever, reduces to null, so what? Well, so, we can say A equals A. We can say reason always holds. But we cannot say reason maybe holds or reason sometimes holds or reason doesn't always hold. Because in each of those statements, there is a section that just reduces to null, that reduces to blah, 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 blah. So, in the absence of any alternative possible statement, it must be true that A equals A. Or at least I can say it must be true, and if you say, well, maybe it isn't, you just said blah, 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 blah. So no one's disagreed with me yet, right? So this is how we prove things in philosophy. It's the only thing you can say on the subject. Good enough. Yeah. Okay. That said, we just kind of proved an abstract thing. We didn't prove anything about the real world, right? Because, math is true, okay? 4 plus 4 equals 8, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 8 divided by 2 equals 4. All those statements are analytically true, but there are no 8s or 4s or 2s or 1s in nature, right? There's no actually existing 1 you can find anywhere. Or a perfect circle, or perfect triangle, or none of those things. Those are all analytical truths that don't have anything to do with the real world, except as we perceive and impose on it with our, thoughts and interpretations, etc. Okay, so let's try to get something real to survive the alien blood. Well, Descartes said cogito ergo sum, and that sounds pretty good. Now we've got reason back, right? So, can we still be sure that consciousness exists in the real world? Well, yeah, I think so. Because if I'm deceived, I wouldn't be here to exist. That thing still holds. And also because Kant put forward an idea that the shape of your filters alone can't tell you anything about the real world. You have to have an experience plus your filters to even begin to hope to know something about the world. Right? Because your filters may be arbitrary, but presumably the experience might tell you something about the real world. So at least then it's possible. So Kant was making the point that if we're just analyzing our filters, then we're doing things like math, where it's 1 plus 1 equals 2, etc. In a 3D space, a cube has a lot of sides, and in a 2D space, a triangle has 3 sides. Okay. So consciousness is an experience, right? It's not just a filter, but it's something that you actually are going through right now. So it's a synthetic, not an analytical truth. So synthetic truths have at least the potential to tell us something about the real world. The experience of consciousness is a synthetic truth. Therefore, I think, therefore I am is a synthetic judgment or conclusion, and it's valid. So, at this point, the materialists will object. And they'll say one of two things. They'll say, yes, consciousness is real, but it's just material. It's just electricity, quarks, and a highly complex emergent pattern from energy fields, something like that, right? So consciousness exists, but it's material. Or they'll say, no, you're just deceived that you're conscious, but actually it's just material processes. You're not really there. Okay. So statement 2 is easier to answer because you just say, look, if I'm deceived that I'm conscious, then I'm not really here to be deceived. That doesn't make sense. Statement 1 is trickier. Is consciousness just something material? Because if you're conscious and that consciousness is supernatural, then you are a ghost that happens to have a body too, which is nice, but not essential to being a ghost, right? So if we agree that consciousness is supernatural, then we're all ghosts with flesh on, and believing in ghosts is a reasonable thing to do, sort of, and in fact, the only thing you can be sure exists is your ghost. And you can't even be sure you have a body, or that bodies are a thing, or that the material world is real. You can only be sure of a ghost existing. So you definitely believe in ghosts, right? And of course, materialism is not down with the spooky stuff. So they would disagree and say, no, 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 it's just matter, it's just energy, right? So let's investigate. Let's see how good these materialists are at philosophy. Now, once again, we're going to be very precise with our definitions, just like we were with A equals A. So, put your thinking cap on. When I say consciousness, people think of so many things when you say the word consciousness, like awareness of social justice causes, or I went on a really intense drug trip, or like something weird Tao philosophical, Eastern mysticism, etc. or whatever, right? People think of lots of different things when we talk about consciousness. And I'm not, I might think of unconsciousness when a guy in UFC gets knocked out. But anyway, we're doing high epistemology and metaphysics right now. So when I say, all that other stuff is great, and that's different areas of human endeavor and art, whatever, but for the purposes of this discussion, we are focusing on what we can know epistemologically. And so we need to use very careful definitions tailored to that purpose. So, for this discussion, consciousness, I define it as the, me experiencing what's happening right now in my box of a head. I'm seeing things. I'm hearing myself talk. I'm talking, and I'm a little bit hungry. I have sensations, right? White and red and green, and I can still see some color through my red glasses. And my fingers are a little bit cold, and the pressure on my feet as I walk. These are sensations, right? The taste of my tongue in my mouth, slightly dry feeling, the sound coming into my ears. Sensations. And experience, the experiencer and the sensation, they're kind of one, right? Because you can't have a sensation without someone experiencing. So it's just kind of one experience, right? Just being in this box, or whatever it is, this thing that we are, this ghostness, this consciousness. That's what I'm talking about, just that experience. Now, whatever's causing it, right? If like angelic beams of light are shining in and creating this thought bubble, or gross explosions of chemical reactions and jumping electrons, or like the greater consciousness of the universe manifesting through karma and suffering, and becoming the Maya illusion of separateness for a short time, infinitely reincarnated, whatever. Who cares about that external, causative stuff? We're doing epistemology. We only care about what we know, and what we know is this experience right now, this thing, right? That's happening right now in my head. Okay, so my definition is consciousness is just what you experience. That's it. It's the experiencer experience, right? That whole thing. That's what it is. Okay. So like maybe there's a subconscious that's influencing my conscious, but if I'm not aware of it, then it's not happening. According to this definition, then we don't pay any attention to it. So stuff I'm unaware of is outside of the picture, right? Maybe the subtle weird feelings in the background of my heart are perceptions, right? And I'm experiencing those. Maybe I'm afraid and nervous and feeling the butterflies, but I don't consciously realize I'm afraid. I don't say those words. Doesn't matter, right? We're talking about the experiencer. So the butterflies, the sensations, that stuff, that's what's in consciousness, right? Okay. So we're being very precise and very tight with it. Now this consciousness is all we really know exists. We can't be sure of anything else existing right now. So, of course, we can all agree that, even though I see a couch, maybe there's no couch. We've all seen The Matrix. So I can't be actually seeing anything physical from the couch, can I? I'm not, not seeing electrons and atoms and protons and stuff because, maybe it isn't there at all, or maybe, there's no such thing as matter. It's possible, right? So I'm not really seeing the couch in itself, the couch as it truly is. Rather, I'm having an experience of, colors and shapes that are in my mind. So this is the phenomenon. The phenomenon is not the real thing, it's just the perception. So they both start with P, right? Phenomenon, perception. And then the noumenon is the thing in itself. Starts with N, the same thing as nonsense, because we never know the thing in itself as it truly is. Maybe God can do that, but we can't. Right? These are Kant's terms, by the way. Phenomenon and noumenon. So, it's one strike against the materialists that we can be sure that the consciousness exists, but we can't be sure that the material world exists at all. Maybe matters and atoms and quarks and energy patterns don't exist, never existed. That's all fake. And it's hard to be a materialist under those circumstances. But maybe they could insist, well, yes, the material world may not exist, but your brain has to exist because your consciousness exists. And your brain is material, so therefore the material world exists. That's kind of a pretty weak argument. I mean, imaginatively speaking, wouldn't there be ways for there to be consciousness without material brains? But maybe someone wants to be really insistent and stuck in their ways and refuse to say that that's enough and say, no, definitely have to be a brain for there to be consciousness. No other way. Okay, well, fine. Then let's look harder. So what's inside of consciousness? What's really in there, in that bubble? The experiencing, experiencer, just experience bubble. What's in there? Is there any atoms or quarks or electrons or buckyballs or any of that crap? No. Instead, we have things like brown. What's brown? Is brown in a physics textbook? I mean, it's a wavelength of light, but I don't see light. I don't see something that's a particle in a wave. I see brown. What about soft? What about hurt? These things definitely are not in physics textbooks. They're not in physics at all. They're not things that fit in the world of physics. There's no way to break down the experience brown. It's just the experience brown. If you try to cut it into smaller pieces, you get smaller pieces of brown. There's no way to analyze it, to look harder, to focus more clearly on it, and find the wavelength of light eventually. There's just no path from the consciousness bubble to light. Instead, scratch that. Similarly with pain, with hunger, etc. Now the point I'm trying to get at is that because I've been very precise about my definition of what consciousness is for the purposes of this epistemological exercise, we find that there's no matter in consciousness. Another way of looking at this is we can approach it from the material side. Can we ever make a consciousness out of matter, starting from atoms? Well, I can tell you no, because in fact, you don't know if any person you've ever met is a real person, right? By a real person, I mean someone who has a consciousness inside and is actually experiencing it. They could all be just empty shells or simulations or like holograms or whatever, right? There could be nothing inside them. Even if they were fully fleshed, genuine, bona fide human beings, there's never any way to know, no matter how perfectly the electrons and quarks are spinning in here, there's never any way to know that there's actually an experience bubble in between those ears of somebody else, unless you actually get inside their bubble and see it to be sure. There's no physical measurement test that can actually prove that that bubble is happening. Which means that the bubble is not determined by any arrangement of physics or energy, right? Matter or energy or anything to do with physics. It's just unrelated. In other words, you can build the perfect genius supercomputer, singularity, IQ, more than everyone on Earth added together in points, right? So just billions of points of IQ. Doesn't matter. We can't be sure that there's actually a consciousness bubble in there. We'll never know. We'll never know. Any way you arrange it in this universe of ours doesn't get you to seeing inside someone's bubble and knowing that there's a bubble there, right? I mean, what could ever do that? You could have like a video showing the other person's bubble and what they're seeing and you could have a VR experience of going inside someone's bubble, but you wouldn't be sure that there actually was another observer. Because you're like this point of an observer, right? The special thing about you is there's someone behind the movie screen. How do you know there's someone behind everybody else's movie screen? You can't ever know. It can't be proved with physics, which means it isn't built with physics. So at this point, I think we've done a pretty good job of beating up on the materialists, and we've gotten to the point where epistemologically, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, is the only thing we can prove exists. And we've proven that that thing is supernatural. Because, remember, it's a synthetic judgment, so it actually exists in the real world. Not like 1 + 1 = 2 true, but like, well, there's nothing else like this, is there? There's nothing else we can prove exists, for sure, in the real world. But let's say you proved that George Washington existed. Well, then your consciousness would exist like George Washington existed, in that sense. And secondly, we've proven that it's not made of matter. So, if something is really actually existing and it's not made of physics stuff, things you find in physics textbooks, then we have a perfectly good word for that in our dictionary. It's called supernatural. And what a surprise, this supernatural substance, we can call it spirit or whatever, but we just mean epistemologically, let's not get imprecise, this experiencing bubble point with phenomena or perceptions in it. That's what we mean. That's what actually exists. That's the ghost. It's the one ghost you can be sure is real. Though you doubt everything else, you believe in ghost. Seems very much. Well, we've got reason back, and we've got a bit of terra firma. We know that something is real and something exists. Can we, like Descartes, skip from there merely to proving the existence of God? I don't think so. I think this observation point is tremendously limited. I think it leaves us, like a man looking through the slit of a World War II tank and trying not to run over thousands of baby gerbils. Your visibility chink is very, very, very inadequate to the job, right? So I think that teaches man a bit of humility about his place in the cosmos. So we've got all these filters on our perception, and there's so little we can know for sure about the world, and we really have to be humble. And in a way, I think it's more humble than, true relativism or solipsism, because that, or those schools teach that, everything is constructed, and since we're the only people around, we're the ones who construct truth. Well, that doesn't quite seem right to me. But another interesting effect, I think, that will gradually work itself out is that we'll get a bit of the old school attitude back in the culture of, the classical attitude that there's something real and something solid, something beyond doubt. A bit of structure, a bit of rule in place, a bit of law. Yeah. And I think that's probably a good, healthy thing. Anyway, I look forward to your comments.